of sweet nectar, calling out to hungry hearts everywhere through endless time. You who hunger, you who thirst, I offer you this body mine. Calling out to hungry spirits everywhere through endless time. Calling all you hungry hearts, all the lost and left behind. Gather round and share this meal. Your joy and sorrow, I make it mine. Calling out to hungry hearts, everywhere through endless time. You who hunger, you who thirst, I offer you this body mine. Calling out to hungry spirits, everywhere through endless time. Calling all you hungry hearts, all the lost and left behind. Gather round and share this meal. Your joy and sorrow, I make it mine. Udam saranam gacchami, Dhammam saranam gacchami, Sangham saranam gacchami, Udam saranam gacchami, Dhammam saranam gacchami, Sangham saranam gacchami. Being one with the Buddhas and the 10 directions, being one with the Dharma and the 10 directions, being one with the Sangha and the 10 directions, being one with all the formless forms throughout space and time, being one with the great wisdom Manjushri Bodhisattva, being one with the great compassion Avalokiteshvara Bodhisattva, being one with the great compassion Avalokiteshvara Bodhisattva, being one with our original teacher Shakyamuni Buddha, being one with the lineage from Mahakashyapa Sangha, being one with the Mahayana Sadharma Pundarika Sutra, being one with the great mother Ajna Paramita. Attention. Attention. Raising the Bodhi mind, the supreme meal is offered to all the hungry spirits throughout space and time, filling the smallest particle to the largest space. All you hungry spirits in the 10 directions, please gather here. I pray that all who receive this offering will return its merits to all Buddhas and to all creations throughout space and time. In this way, they will be thoroughly satisfied. I further pray that in receiving this meal, all your sufferings will be eliminated, and that you will be liberated, so that being joyously reborn, you will play freely in the fields of the pure land. Raising the voting mind and practicing the enlightened way, you become the future Buddhas without any further regrets. Those who realize the way first, please vow to liberate all others throughout all space and time. I further beseech all Buddhas to sustain me day and night, and give me courage to fulfill my vows. In offering this meal, I pray that all Buddhas give its merits equally to all creations of the Dharma worlds. Please transfer the merits of this offering to the Dharma world of thusness, to unsurpassable enlightenment, and to all the Buddha wisdoms. With all our love, with our spirit, and with all our mind, inviting misery and suffering no longer, we vow to accomplish the way. May all creations in the Dharma world swiftly accomplish the Buddha way together. Hori Yari Taya Yataya. Being one with the unconditioned Tathagata. Om Mohote Rigyatari Tata Yataya. Being one with the boundless Tathagata. Om Akusara Patata Yata Parokite Om San Vada San Vara. Being one with all Tathagatas and Avalokiteshvara Bodhisattva, please nourish and sustain us. Om Akusoro Vaya Tata Yata 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 Om Soro Soro Hara Soro Hara Soro Suvaka. Being one with the inconceivable body Tathagata, let the nectar of Dharma spring forth. No Makusan Mangabotanan Man, no Makusan Mangabotanan Man, no Makusan Mangabotanan Man, no Makusan Gabotanan Pando Makusan Gabotanan Pando Makusan Gabotanan Pando Makusan Gabotanan No Makusan Gabotanan Pando 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 Makusan Gabotanan. Being one with all Buddhas, I turn we love compassion. Being one with all Buddhas, I turn we love compassion. Being one with all Buddhas, I turn we love compassion. Being one with all Buddhas, I turn we love compassion. Being one with all Buddhas, I turn we love compassion. Being one with all Buddhas, I turn we love compassion. Being one with all Buddhas, I turn we love compassion. Taho Nyorai no Bhagavate Arahantaratam no Yatata Yataya Jokin Hongo Ukuchien Manam Taho Nyorai no Bhagavate Arahantaratam Yatata Yataya Jokin Hongo Fukuchien Man. Being one with all Buddhas and unifying spheres, integrating all families, wealth and wisdom are in abundance. Nam-myo Shikishin Nyorai no Bhagavate Soropaya Tata Yataya Ashuro Inman Soko Nam-myo Shikishin Nyorai no Bhagavate Soropaya Tata Yataya Ashuro Inman Soko. Being one with all Buddhas in the formless spheres, bodies overflow with boundless Dharma, and our life is fulfilled. Namukanro Nyorai no Bhagavate Amilite Aranjaya Tata Yataya Amoshin Rojukirakunamukanro Nyorai no Bhagavate Amilite Aranjaya Tata Yataya Amoshin Rojukiraku. Being one with all Buddhas in the formless spheres, bodies overflow with boundless Dharma, and our life is fulfilled. Namo Hakushin Nyorai no Bhagavate Viharagata Yataya Inko Dayon Chikitu Namo Hakushin Nyorai no Bhagavate Viharagata Yataya Inko Dayon Chikitu. Being one with all Buddhas in the study spheres, throats are open and eating and drinking fully satisfied. Namuri Puri Nyorai no Bhagavate Avayan Yaraya Tata Yataya Kushitsudori Gaki. Namuri Puri Nyorai no Bhagavate Avayan Yaraya Tata Yataya Kushitsudori Gaki. Being one with all Buddhas in the surface sphere, all sufferings of the hungry spirits are healed. Om Bodhishi Tavodahadayami. Om Bodhishi Tavodahadayami. Om Bodhishi Tavodahadayami. Om Bodhishi Tavodahadayami. Now I have raised up holy mind. Now I have raised up holy mind. Om Sanaya Satoban. Om Sanaya Satoban. Om Sanaya Satoban. Om Sanaya Satoban. I am the Buddhas and they are me. I am the Buddhas and they are me. Yay! This practice I sincerely wish to extend all my love to my own beings, friends, enemies, family, and the humanity, and to all creations for so much done on my behalf. May those who practice in this sphere continue to empower you in which to enjoy. May those who have not be released from suffering and nourish peacefulness. May all creations and the three worlds receive loving benefactions. May those suffering on the three paths come to atonement and be cleansed of all their ills. May they be liberated from samsara and the rising of good and evil. In reciting the gate of sweet nectar and in offering grain, candlelight, and incense, we dedicate its merits to all the babies, children, men, and women who were killed or injured in wars, past and present, to its victims and perpetrators alike. We dedicate its merits to all the wars going on in our communities between humans and viruses, parents and children, the war within ourselves, to the victims and perpetrators alike. We dedicate its merits to all the beings in the natural world who are suffering because of human ignorance, anger, and greed. To the victims and perpetrators alike, we dedicate its merits to all the peacemakers in our communities who have the courage to bear witness to suffering in themselves and others, and by steadfastly bearing witness, find a way to heal this suffering. We dedicate its merits to all ancestors of the Zen life and meditation center and all Sunday mornings and participants, to the spirits of the deceased inhabitants of this place, and to all beings in the Dharma world. We especially pray for the health and well-being of Jenna Demos, Coral Mack, Hoda Boyer, Brian King, Bobby Montejo, Rose Patterson, Ryan Ali, Clarence Cameron, William Bloom, Mark Lula, Marilyn Puricello, Suzanne Strauss, Yoshinobu Sekiguchi, Tom Riley, Cheryl Schreckengoss, Marianne Hammett, Roshi J. Gage, Carmela Clinton, Luke DiMarti, Jean LaShaw, Paul Tressler, Barbara and Sheldon Schlossman, Ben Shearer, Mary Los Rocos, Val Gray Ward, Ari Watson, Liz DeMarie, Vicki Werner, to all people ill because of COVID-19 virus, and to
Brian King, Valerie Wright, Barbara Wright, Michael Malthouse,
We dedicate these, may they be serene and clear through all their ills. We dedicate the merits to those in the transition of death. Tracy Little, Tom McKean, Alan Malari, Pauline McMahon, Rodolfo Montes de Oca, Lee Bell, Chuck Adolph, Kathleen Doherty, David Arcega, Representative Elijah Cummins, Fumi Knox, Victor Margolin, Carmela Clinton, Joanne Scribner, Larry Swike, Arthur Jensen, all people who have died because of COVID-19 in the US and the world, and to
John Crane.
we especially dedicate the merits of this service to everyone who are deemed essential workers, who are risking their lives and working on our behalf in the food industry, in the healthcare industry, in so many industries. We are grateful for this opportunity to practice this middle path of peace. May our families, our communities, and our lives blossom forth with great compassion, love, and respect for ourselves, this land, and all of its living things. This is our life, the length of our days. Day and night we meditate upon you. This is our life, the length of our days. Day and night we meditate upon you. This is our life, the length of our days. Day and night we meditate upon you. This is our life, the length of our days. We meditate upon you.
We're going to do sitting.
Yeah, 15 minutes of sitting.
So we'll have sitting until 9:45, and then we'll have announcements from 9:45 to 10, and then Sensei will give a Dharma talk. It sounded like a hungry ghost was trying to get a hold of us during the service. Did you hear that? Yeah, they're very persistent. Can you change the message on here? I'm going to mute our mic too.
You have to change it. You could put it up. Well, good morning, everybody. It's really great to see you all here on Easter Sunday. Yay! And I see new folks too. Jason, all the way from, where are you from, Jason? Now you're living where? Where are you living, Jason? Bethlehem.
In Pennsylvania, Bethlehem.
Bethlehem, Pennsylvania. Great. And I see Annie. Annie is from London.
England, Cornwall, not London. Cornwall, yeah.
Oh, great to have you here.
It's great to be here, June.
Yeah, great. And I see Suzanne and Deb. Great that you joined us, Suzanne and Deb. Some new people too. And Pam Ransom, she's all the way in the Boundary Waters in Minnesota. Fabulous. Tanya, wow, so many people are here today. Well, that's really wonderful. So, I wanted to begin with a chant, a Hawaiian chant. This is a chant of inspiration, and it's for Laka. It's asking Laka, who's the goddess of hula, who lives in the forest, to inspire. No anao laka I kaulu vehi kuanai lunau helai he ohia kuo mauna loa e aloha mai kaula na ula yamapu e ya kaula la he ula leo kanai nai aloha nau yao e laka Ilakai malimai ho'oluia uaikea. And this beautiful poem by the nun, the Buddhist nun Rengetsu, 1790s. She lived in Kyoto. Plum blossoms, eagerly awaiting the bush warblers, the lovely plum trees along my garden wall burst into bloom. That is like the tree in our backyard. It is incredible. The first April we've been here, and this tree is all with white blossoms in the back, that big tree that provides shade. I do not know what kind of tree it is, but someone says maybe plum.
which would be really wonderful because plum blossoms are like the first to come out in spring. And it seems to be like busting out all over, and I don't see a lot of other trees like that. So my talk today is about life as the practice ground, right? We are living our life. And how to practice in this crazy time. Yeah. So I've got some beautiful quotes to begin. And since it's Easter, I have a quote by Jesus from the Gospel of Thomas. If you bring forth what is within you, what you bring forth will save you. If you do not bring forth what is within you, what you do not bring forth will destroy you. So I think in our practice, we can be more in touch with that, right? What is it? What is the message within? Most of the times it's pretty difficult to hear because we've got so many things going through our head. So being in touch with that is so critical. And then I saw this other quote by Stephen Jenkinson. He's a teacher, author, storyteller, founder of Orphan Wisdom, a house for teaching skills of deep living. In troubled times, you have to be what you are looking for. You must become the embodiment of the thing you want to be the beneficiary of. These are the times we're in. Let me repeat that. In troubled times, you have to be what you are looking for. You must become the embodiment of the thing you want to be the beneficiary of. These are the times we're in. So, if you want people to be patient with you, you have to be patient. I know. And then here's my favorite, one of my favorite quotes of Dogen. In the great way of the Buddhas and ancestors, there is always unsurpassable, continuous practice, which is the way like a circle without interruption. Between the arousing of awakening mind, practice, awakening, and nirvana, there is not the slightest break. Continuous practice is the circle of the way. Let me say that again. Between the arousing of awakening mind, practice, awakening, and nirvana, there is not the slightest break. So that's like one continuous thing, being awake, even when you're not awake, which is good to know. And that's Dogen. And here, which I'm going to be quoting a lot from Norman Fisher's new book today, newest book. I have a quote from him. Paradoxically, secluding yourself and sitting in silence brings you to a tremendously heartfelt compassion, which is not only I care about others, but I am others. I am nothing but others. Others are nothing but me. This is the Bodhisattva attitude. Right, the Bodhisattvas. Right, that's, those beings that just work so hard for the welfare of others, to help awaken people. And then they will also awaken. So there's no separation actually between these people who want to help others awaken and people who awaken. Continuous practice. So, I ask myself, what is continuous practice? What does that look like, right? Well, it's got to be my everyday life with all of the blooper mistakes and everything. And, can we as bodhisattvas, well, we must be compassionate when we make those kinds of mistakes as well. We must. That's our nature. That's who we are. Every moment, feeling overwhelmed, so we can pause and we can give ourselves some empathy, because we are living in really different times. We are in a huge gap as we teach in our foundations class, right? We are in a huge gap. This is not life as usual. So this is really also an opportunity for us to kind of contemplate how we are in regular life, pre-COVID life, and how we are now. And are we changing in different ways? Can we notice changes in attitude, in ideas? Can we notice? Are we maybe more flexible or not? Can we just notice that? So I had a dream about a month ago, right as this was heating up, and the line that came to me was, your place is the storm's eye of the universe. Well, I think we're the storm as well. Yeah, just not the eye, but we know how to get to the eye, that calm spot. And this is through our practice. This is foundational. Our practices. I notice when I don't sit, I am much more reactive. So, I did see this morning's New York Times headlines about the US has suffered the most corona deaths in the world now, over 20,000. And I think of all of the courageous people who are deemed, essential workers that bring us our food that we can eat and be here. That's one, such a, it's our lifeline. So it's been quite a week over here at the Zen Center. It's been quite a week. And I'll get into that, but I wanted to start, it was just such a busy week, one day we started on Tuesday, well, actually we started because on Monday, when after my morning meditation, early morning meditation, I came up to find Roshi kind of feverishly, not too feverishly, but he had cut up his t-shirts and he was making masks that you don't sew because he does not know how to sew. And he had rubber bands and he said, look, I have to make masks. I'm like, okay, I think we have to make masks. And so because that just wasn't, it's okay for, it's okay, but I think the sewing one, and I really love Susan's design. It looks really simple, and if we can do that, that'd be great. It seems much easier to sew. We just have to get that cord or some kind of cording. So we sewed a little bit on Tuesday and Wednesday, and we made something like 26. And then Thursday, we decided we're going to spend all day sewing, like 8 hours, just take a lunch break and keep going. And we made 39 on that day. And then Friday, we kind of fell off the wagon. I was like kind of tired, and so we managed to make 6. So anyway, because there were other things to do. And one of the things that we did was every Friday morning after our meditation, we have this poetry circle that has been meeting for, I don't know, I was trying to remember when Dave Balekis, our member, started it. About, 4 years ago or so. And so we, after meditation here, we would go out to a coffee shop. It was actually on the corner, right? We'd go out to a coffee shop and we'd, just get together in the beginning and just, talk, maybe an hour. And then somebody suggested, why don't we bring a poem to the next one? So we said, yeah, that's a good idea. And so we started, bringing poetry. Everybody brings whatever, they want to, and then we read. And so I thought, Friday, I think I'm just going to get them started, and then I'm going to go eat breakfast, and then I'm going to sew. And then I was on, and then I just couldn't, it felt so nourishing to me to hear this poetry. So we're going to have a Sunday morning Zen of just poetry in May. And also my friend Jason was going to be there from Pennsylvania. So I've asked 3 people to read some poems today. And I thought we'd start with Chris Dussel. And she's got a poem by Jack Gilbert called A Brief for the Defense.
Let me just say before I start, I have this little collection of poems from this book that's called The Poetry of Impermanence, Mindfulness, and Joy. And it's a wonderful little book. And I found this poem that, to me, I thought just sort of reflected where some of my experience lately. June just talked about there being the U.S. being leading in deaths, and I just I've had, I think all of us are concerned about others that we don't know, and we're concerned about our families, and we're concerned about ourselves, and at the same time, I find for myself that I am experiencing this period of time as really being helpful to my quietness and my stillness. So there's something really wonderful happening at the same time that there's this darkness. So I came upon this poem, A Brief for the Defense by Jack Gilbert, and it seemed to capture it pretty well. Sorrow everywhere, slaughter everywhere. If babies are not starving someplace, they are starving somewhere else, with flies in their nostrils. But we enjoy our lives because that's what God wants. Otherwise, the mornings before summer dawn would not be made so fine. The Bengal tiger would not be fashioned so miraculously well. The poor women at the fountains are laughing together between the suffering they have known and the awfulness in their future, smiling and laughing while somebody in the village is very sick. There is laughter every day in the terrible streets of Calcutta, and the women laugh in the cages of Bombay. If we deny our happiness, resist our satisfaction, we lessen the importance of their deprivation. We must risk delight. We can do without pleasure, but not delight, not enjoyment. We must have the stubbornness to accept our gladness in the ruthless furnace of this world. To make injustice the only measure of our attention is to praise the devil. If the locomotive of the Lord runs us down, we should give thanks that the end had magnitude. We must admit there will be music despite everything. We stand at the prow again of a small ship anchored late at night in the tiny port looking over to the sleeping island. The waterfront is 3 shuttered cafes and 1 naked light burning. To hear the faint sound of oars in the silence as a rowboat comes slowly out and then goes back is truly worth all the years of sorrow that are to come.
Thank you, Chris. Yes, delight. And so in this, it's actually an interview that Matthew Abrahams did of Norman Fisher about his book in the May issue of Tricycle. And the book is, about the vows of the Bodhisattva, how extravagant and absurd. They're so huge, right? So this is Norman says, the challenges of the world can seem insurmountable. They stretch back before we were born and will almost certainly remain after we die. But Zen Buddhist teachings suggest that this is no reason to despair, and that we should embrace the impossibility of our task. At many Zen temples and even at our Zen center, practitioners chant the seemingly self-contradictory lines known as the 4 great Bodhisattva vows. So Norman has this take on it. He says, beings are numberless, may I free them all. Reactions are endless, may I release them all. Doors to experience are infinite, may I enter them all. Ways of awakening are limitless, may I know them all. Impossible, but aren't they inspirational at the same time? And Mr. Abrahams asks Norman, when Zen practitioners recite these 4 vows, you say that we're not really promising to keep it. Could you explain that? And Norman says, we usually think of a vow as a promise. I vow to pay you back the $100 I borrowed from you. But Bodhisattva vows are really extravagant and impossible. Sentient beings are infinite in number, and I vow to save them all. What does it mean to recite that vow in earnest? It means I vow to do my best to practice kindness and benefit for anyone and everyone, even though I know that I'll forget. This is my commitment. Every time I find myself being selfish, I'll remind myself of this vow, and I'll pull myself back together again. This is my path. I can forgive myself for all the times that I fall down on the job because inevitably I will. So on the one hand, I know it's impossible, but on the other hand, I have some imaginative faith that someday, some way, sentient beings will be saved. It will work out somehow, not while I'm alive in this short human life, but in some future time. This will happen. I believe it in some crazy way. I can't convince you of it. I can't argue for it, but I feel hopeful about humanity because I've taken this vow and I'm practicing it every single day. That's the idea of this vow. So then the interviewer asked, why then is the phrase, I vow to save all sentient beings, rather than I vow to try my best to contribute to the saving of all sentient beings? And Norman says, stating it in the most positive and extravagant way is important because I'm committed to that impossible task of saving all sentient beings, even though I'm not doing it perfectly. I vow to try my best to the best I can is not strong enough. The strength comes from the impossibility, and that's what inspires us. It's like saying yes to life, right? We have this as a mindfulness exercise actually in our foundations class. Try saying yes to whatever arises, because we spend a lot of time saying no, right? And I know my brother from another mother, Jason Poole, he was practicing this. He would say yes, he would show up, as much as he could. And he did a great job at it. So it's like saying yes to things that arises in your life. Yeah, and I had a really amazing yes this week. Oh my God, I'll have to tell you about it. So this week, we've been making a lot of masks, and one of my friends, quilter friends, emailed me and said, West Suburban Hospital has just found 7,000 old N95 masks. The only thing that has to be done to them to repurpose them or remake them work is the elastic needs to be sewn in them. So, if you want to help with this, I think they might be able to use your help. So I said, absolutely, I want to help with this, even though we're in the midst of making our 30 masks that day, 39 masks on Thursday. So I emailed the person that she recommended, and then Carolina Song emailed me back quite quickly and said, you should contact Jennifer Misiak. She is the coordinator of this project. And then I thought, Jennifer Misiak, oh my God, she is the one who was our neighbor on Humphrey Street that actually was the impetus to help us move out of that house that we started from. No. And she was the coordinator of this massive project, 7,000 masks. So she said in the email, call Jennifer. All right. So, the last time I spoke with Jennifer, it was not under good terms. This was maybe about 7, 8 years ago. So I had to pause. I had to breathe. Maybe it was 5 minutes. I walked around a little bit, kind of, getting centered. And I said, I really didn't want to call her, but I knew I had to call her because I wanted to help with this project, 7,000 masks. And I had Googled it and I had seen that Memphis hospitals had found 20,000. And they had 400 volunteers in one weekend repurpose these N95 masks. So I took a breath and I called her, and she answered, and she was very calm, which I noticed right off because, you know, she didn't used to be calm when we were her neighbors. You know, I think, you know, she wanted privacy, and we are very public. You know, people, a lot of people were coming to our place, hula people, Zen people. So I introduced myself and I said, I'd like to help you. I heard about your N95 mask. And she said, oh. And then she said, well, you know, we're just about at the end of it, which is fabulous, which is great. I said, oh, okay. Well, you know, we are making masks here too. We're trying to make as many as we can. And she told me about, it's called Chicago Mask Makers, who are based here in Oak Park. She said, you should definitely contact the Chicago Mask Makers. So I looked on their website and I saw that they were making masks for healthcare professionals. So I thanked her for what she had done and I hung up. And then I had to breathe a little bit. So I then, you know, asked myself, okay, I mean, it's been like, you know, 8 years, 7 or 8 years since, and I was still like had this in my body. So that was very interesting to me. But I was really, really impressed that she was heading up this, this effort to make like new 7,000 masks. Life. So constant practice. And I'm so grateful to my meditation practice. I do not think I would be able to do this were it not for my meditation practice. So, Flo read a wonderful poem on Friday by Rumi that I have asked her to also read today. So, Flo, are you ready?
I am, yes. But thank you so much for your lovely words and the lovely service this morning. Thank you. Okay, so this poem is by Rumi, written many, many, many years ago, of course, and it's called Cry Out in Your Weakness. A dragon was pulling a bear into its terrible mouth. A courageous man went and rescued the bear. There are such helpers in the world who rush to save anyone who cries out. Like mercy itself, they run toward the screaming. And they can't be bought off. If you were to ask one of those, why did you come so quickly? He or she would say, because I heard your helplessness. Where lowland is, that's where water goes. All medicine wants is pain to cure. And don't just ask for one mercy. Let them flood in. Let the sky open under your feet. Take the cotton out of your ears, the cotton of consolations, so you can hear the sphere music. Give your weakness to one who helps. Crying out loud and weeping are great resources. A nursing mother, all she does is wait to hear her child. Just a little beginning whimper, and she's there. God created the child that is your wanting, so that it might cry out, so that milk might come. Cry out, don't be stolid and silent with your pain. Lament and let the milk of loving flow into you. The hard rain and wind are ways the cloud has to take care of us. Be patient. Respond to every call that excites your spirit. Ignore those that make you fearful and sad, that degrade you back toward disease and death.
Thank you, Flo. I really like that. What was it? Respond to anything or everything that excites your spirit. So this mask making has been the latest thing to really excite me, is to make masks, because the need is quite great. I looked, there is another group called Masks Now in Chicago, and they're very organized. On their website, you can put if you need masks, and if you can make masks, and if you can provide supplies, kind of like what we're doing, but on a much bigger scale. So as of 2 days ago, they had something like 14,500 requests for masks, and they had provided about 1,700 masks. But they were upbeat, you know, they're all making masks, and, you know, they're trying to meet the need as much as they can. So, you know, it was fabulous. That's what bodhisattvas do. I just love that poem, because there's, you know, we run to the cry. Milk comes, right? When the baby cries, milk just naturally comes. That's like how the metaphor for bodhisattvas. So I've been noticing a lot of reactions in me: fear, impatience, some anger, happiness, delight, just noticing all these different, you know, and just kind of breathing with it. I think I read in psychology or neuroscience that an emotion actually lasts 1.5 minutes, really. If you just kind of breathe with it, it will leave. But if you've got a story that goes with it and you keep ruminating on the story, it will extend the time of that emotion that you have. So, again, I'm going to quote Norman Fisher, because he's got such a fabulous way of speaking. And in his book, The World Could Be Otherwise, Imagination and the Bodhisattva Path, he says, strengthening our imaginative capacity to see how things can be radically different one day is the way of the Bodhisattva. And Mr. Abrahams asks, Norman, you write in the opening chapter of The World Could Be Otherwise, the saving grace of Bodhisattva ideal is that it is so outrageously extravagant, so absurdly imaginative that we are clear from the start that we can never realize it. Can you explain that? And he says, the book is an argument against the pervasive contemporary attitude of let's not promise what we can't deliver, and let's do something doable He's saying the book is actually an argument against that. And he says there's a whole set of assumptions embedded in that kind of thinking. He says the problem is that we will always become dissatisfied with whatever real world solutions we come up with, because we can always see beyond them. Human beings have an imagination that can conceive the impossible. We can always say, well, that's okay, but that's not enough. I'm old enough to have seen 1 million bad political regimes fall and be replaced by the wonderful new regime, which 15 minutes later is now disappointing and terrible. I want to be clear here. It's not that I don't believe in a rational scientific world. I see that worldview and accept its validity. But if we don't have other ways of imagining the world, if we only pay attention to data, then the conclusion is inescapable. We're definitely doomed. Dystopia is like 5 seconds away. That's what the data tells us. That's what scientific materialism tells us. We can't live in that world. We have to live in a world in which the imagination goes beyond that. So his book reframes those 6 practices of a bodhisattva, the 6 perfections. And here they are again: generosity, ethical conduct, which now includes, I think, social distancing, wearing a mask when you're out, sheltering in as much as possible. Patience is another one, my favorite. Joyful effort, meditation, and wisdom or understanding. And he says this about why he did that. He says, we require a path that engages our need for the impossible. The Bodhisattva path, which proposes a horizon of universal love that we will never see in our lifetime, is the only thing that will continue to inspire us. And the 6 paramitas are the simplest way of describing the Bodhisattva's way of life. The word that we translate as perfection, paramita, means to go beyond. The 6th paramita, the paramita of wisdom, which is said to pervade all the others, specifically means the wisdom that understands the emptiness of all dharmas, that this materialistic world is an illusion and that everything is just a point of connection that rises and falls away in the same moment. That insight gives us a love for everything that arises in every moment. And it's the way that we practice all the paramitas. Let me say that again. That insight about, everything is just a point of connection that rises and falls away in the same moment. That insight gives us a love for everything that arises in every moment, even our demons, like Sultram Alione's practice of feeding the demons that Roshi has taught us. So these perfections take into account the normal virtues, but go beyond them to a more imaginative, more open, more expansive sense of what those things are, those paramitas. And so Mr. Abrahams asks, how does that work? When is it imagination and when does it become reality? And Norman says, asking the question in terms of imagination on the one hand and reality on the other is already within the framework of materialist philosophy, which we all completely accept and believe. But it's too limited. Reality and imagination are not two opposing things. We make reality with our imagination. According to cognitive science and according to philosophers from Immanuel Kant on, we are seeing a world that is created by a whole complex of factors within our human organism, including our sense organs and our imaginations. We put together the world imaginatively. If we ask, is the Eucharist really the body of Christ, or are we just imagining it? The answer is both. It really is the body of Christ, plus we're imagining it. Scientifically, we can't say that we can detect in this water molecules that were part of the body of Christ, but in our knowing, in our feeling, and in our hearts, we are making something real. So the real question is, what kind of imagination do you want? What kind of imagination do you validate? Do you validate the imagination that reduces the world, or do you validate the imagination that expands the world? That was a lot. Isn't this fabulous? So here's the final question. You write that in meditation, we have to leave the world to find solidarity with it. You have to leave the world to find solidarity with it. That seems to speak to a common criticism about meditation being self-absorbed. In other words, why should we spend time looking inward when there are people right now out on the streets suffering or in their homes? And Norman says, I just came back from a 3-month monastic training period, probably at Tassajara. And I thought, how many hours of my life have I spent just sitting there? Just think of all the things I could have done in that time. But considering the fact that so much helping ends up being counterproductive, it is worthwhile to take some time to find within yourself an attitude shift that may make your activity less self-serving, less counterproductive, and perhaps better for the world. And when you sit there long enough, you see all the ins and outs of being human. You see through your own individual spin to the basic stuff at the very, very bottom, which we all share in exactly the same way. Paradoxically, secluding yourself and sitting in silence brings you to a tremendously heartfelt compassion, which is not only, I care about others, but I am others. I am nothing but others. Others are nothing but me. This is the Bodhisattva attitude. So, returning back to that Friday poetry group, my dear friend Jason Poole read a poem he wrote that was just delighted my heart. And I wanted to end my talk today with this poem of Jason's, and he won the Allen Ginsberg Award, second place
Second place, yeah.
this year, 2020, with this poem. So I wanted him to share it, and I'm so glad you came today. Jason, it's so great to see you. We go back like to 2005, you know, with hula in New York City, when I was going to New York City once a month to teach hula. I met Jason there, and he would sing for our rehearsals. Not rehearsals, our practice periods. We practiced the song over and over again until they got it somewhat, you know. And he is also a poet, besides a dad right now, a beautiful young boy, Callum. But anyway, let me turn it over to Jason.
Hi, everybody. It's so good to see you. I miss you, and I look forward to coming back to Chicago sometime very soon. This poem was written before the COVID-19 pandemic that we find ourselves in. And it was a poem that I wrote about living in New York City in the days following 9/11, another time when our beautiful city of New York was shut down and people were living in fear. And I didn't know that the poem would make sense today, because it felt like it resonated to a different time, and now it seems to make sense all over again, that in times of great crisis, there can be some really amazing things that happen. And New York City is a beautiful example of kind of a weird social experiment that worked, where you have all these people living on top of each other, and it shouldn't work. We come from around the globe and historically war against each other, and yet can sit beside each other on a subway. And anyway, this is a poem about what happened in the days following 9/11. It's called The Truth About Cats. In the aftermath of 9/11, we heard stories about animals who'd been liberated from locked apartments downtown because the police had closed Manhattan below 14th Street after the towers fell. And there were so many apartments and so many animals, and the shelters, we heard, were overfilled with those animals who needed homes. We wanted to adopt a dog because we were both dog people who'd grown up with dogs and loved how dogs loved unconditionally and licked faces with gusto and smelled so good after a long sun bath beside a window. Our apartment building had a strict no pets policy, but we heard our co-op board made occasional exceptions for cats because they don't bark or make a lot of noise galumphing through the rooms of an apartment, and don't usually sneak down into a lobby to bite the mailman when he makes his rounds. But maybe the real reason they allowed a few cats is because cats are known to be the mortal enemy of mice and rats. And even the best apartment buildings in New York City might have a rodent or two, because let's face it, small and furry creatures with an acute sense of smell and a strong desire to sleep anywhere other than the gutters of the subway tracks might make their way into a building to stay warm and dry and eat a few nibbles of a bit of pizza crust that might be left out on the kitchen counter overnight. So when we heard the stories, we went to visit a no-kill shelter near Union Square, and we told ourselves we'd look for an older cat because we were sure we'd never know how to care for a kitten, and our furniture would never survive those tiny but sharp claws. And we immediately fell in love with a ginger-haired cat who seemed completely disinterested in us. According to the sign on his cage, his name was Vinny, and he was older, around 1.5 years was the guess, and they said he thought he was a dog. A perfect match. So we went home and sent a letter to our co-op board, who granted us an exception to their strict no pets policy right away, even though we didn't have a rodent problem. A few days later, we went back to the shelter to pick him up, and we were met by a woman named Elfie, who told us they sometimes worked with animal communicators, you know, like that show on TV. And our new cat, Vinny, said he didn't like the name Vinny at all. Apparently, he told the communicator, who I think was Elfie herself, that his name was Thomas, not Tom or Tommy, Thomas. And I said, "Hi, Thomas." And he turned his head to look at me and squinted his yellow eyes, and that was good enough for us. Thomas it was. And we brought him home to stay. The next day at work, I told my friends about him and how he'd chosen his own name, and they all laughed at me and told me I was crazy. They told me cats will look whenever they hear a word that ends in the letter S, because cats want to find the source of the hiss. And when I got home from work, I sat down beside him on the floor, and I called him Nostradamus and Lorenzo Lamas and King Kongus, and he ignored me and stared at the wall. But when I called him Thomas, he turned and looked at me and meowed. Now, I didn't tell my friends they were wrong, but Thomas and I know the truth.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Yes, so I think, you know, we need delight in our lives and humor and laughter. That's so important. And in this practice, you know, you can see in even the smallest things, great joy. But this was a big poem. That was fabulous too. So we have 5 minutes if there are any questions or comments for my talk. You can raise your hand, maybe on the chat or something if I don't see you.
Sensei, we can go longer than 5 minutes if people want to.
All right. So any questions or? Thoughts, any thoughts, questions? Yes, Mark. I
would like to ask Flo to read the part of her poem in which Rumi talks about the soles of the feet and the water. It's a metaphor. Is Flo still with us? Oh, no, she's not. Sadly. Okay, I have to find that poem then.
I can send it to you. I've got it. I'll send it.
It was just wonderful. Thank you. This whole thing was wonderful, actually. Thank you so much, Sensei.
You're welcome. Annie, you can unmute.
Okay, great. Thank you. Thank you, everybody. Thank you, Roshi and Sensei. It's been fabulous to be here and see everyone. Yeah, I'm feeling very emotional. So I wanted to relate a little story I read in The Guardian the other day that made me laugh out loud. It was about, you know, people are saying how hard it is living at home now with their children, homeschooling. They have 3 or 4 children. They're fighting, arguing how to entertain them. And this one guy said, the children were sitting around playing games and everybody was together. And one of his sons said, you know, we should all shave our heads because by the time they let us out, it'll all grow back.
Good one. Okay, everybody. Good idea.
Thank you.
Good morning, Sensei, and everybody. Good morning. Just feeling abundance of all my feelings and grateful for the abundance. and you know, the awakening and the awareness, and just everyone healthy that I can see. I can only imagine people being healthy and seeing all of you. It's really, it's just so lovely. I just wanted to thank you. You know, you really are lovely. You really are lovely of spirit. Yeah, you're just lovely, and just you're just soft and tender and lovely, just lovely. And I really, you know, I just feel filled by that, and I feel inspired that yeah, I am you and you are me, and I have that, and I see that in you, and I feel it in me, and I just am so grateful. And I wanted to thank you for the thoughtfulness of mentioning the Eucharist, mentioning something from Thomas, being that it's Easter, and for me, reconciling today my choice of where I wanted to place myself and sit in this community, and having a little new feeling of not guilty for not engaging in some things my family might have been doing, or maybe something I would have chosen a different year to do first, and bringing that into your talk this morning to remind me that it is all one. It doesn't have to be discerned and separated. And you just brought the gift of me being able to feel the different parts of me that are very much alive. And I don't have to pull myself apart and fragment myself. That feeling whole this morning is all of me and all of you. And what a gift that is this morning. I just want to thank you so much for honoring that today. And I needed that. So everyone have a wonderful day, and thanks.
Okay, Liz, were you going to say something? Oh no, she's waving. Okay. Anybody else? Hi, Ben. Nice to see you. All right, it's 11:01. So unless you have anything else you want to talk about, you can have the floor open for anything now.
Hi, Pam.
Yeah, Pam.
Hey, I'm from the northern country.
There we go. Hi, good to see all of you. Wonderful to be visiting. Being out in the woods, I don't see very many humans. So it's nice, very nice to see all of you. Thank you.
Next week, I know David Loy is going to be our speaker. He's going to give a Dharma talk. So that'll be very interesting. So stay tuned. All right. Mark? No. Okay, I think that is it then, everybody. Have a wonderful Easter Sunday today. Renewal.
Hide some Easter eggs.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Very meaningful morning. Thank you.
Goodbye, everybody.
Bye.
Bye. Bye, Jason.
Bye. See you soon.
Bye, Jason.
Take care. Bye. Bye-bye.
I don't want to leave. Do I have to?
Oh, hi, Melanie. Nice to see you.
Melanie, how are you doing?
I'm doing well.
How are you holding up?
I dropped a mask at Oak Light, and I don't know if they contacted you. They seemed very grateful when I dropped them off.
Hey, that's great.
So
There's
yes,
more coming.
I asked them to send maybe a picture or two.
Okay, right. Great.
How is it working at the hospital?
Right now it's, we get a daily report and we're not maxed out yet, that's the main thing, is not maxed out.
Uh-huh.
So it's going okay. The next couple of weeks we'll find out how that goes.
I see.
But we check in on everybody every day and get reports every day. So it's a constant fluid change of what the hospital needs.
Uh-huh. Okay, any way we can support you? let
Yes,
us know.
sewing.
Well, yeah, or anything else that you might need that we could provide. Yeah.
Yeah, thank you.
Okay.
Bye.
Okay. Bye again. I can't, I don't want to leave. Gonna get anticlimactic pretty soon.
Okay, I'm going now. Bye, everybody.
Bye. Thank you. Thank you, Roshi. Thank you for service this morning.
Okay.